Paul, somehow you got muted.
Appreciate that. At various times during the presentation, we're going to pause for questions. So if you have questions at that point, just please raise your hand. We only have about 5 minutes each, so if we can't get through all the questions, which we likely won't, we're going to have links. You can put your question in and we'll get back to you on those. So here's the breakdown for today. Little bit of background of where this got started and where we're going. What exactly did we do in CPR1, a recap. The third part will introduce PACT CPR2 and some other closely related activities, even though they aren't part of CPR2. And lastly, a wrap up. So the background. Two big pieces here, the Global Warming Response Act, that directed the department to publish a statewide inventory. It directs the department to prepare report recommendations necessary to meet the 80 by 50 goal. That's an 80% reduction in 2006 levels of greenhouse gas emissions by the year 2050. And it directs the department to establish monitoring and reporting rules. In addition, Executive Order 100 directs the department to establish criteria that will govern and reduce emissions of carbon dioxide and, where necessary, short-lived climate pollutants. It also directs the department to establish monitoring and reporting program. So an overview of what we've done at this point, the statewide inventory, that was done end of 2022. It was on the website in December. It's a mid-cycle update. On even years, we're doing updates. On odd years, we're doing new inventories. So each year you will see either a brand new inventory or an update to the previous year. And the update piece is there just because depending on what numbers are reporting, there's longer lags than others. So the update's necessary because in certain years we don't have the data from the previous year. It has to follow. So it was easy to do it that way. 80 by 50 report has been completed, as most of you know. We will talk later today to discuss an update we're going to do to the 80 by 50 report in 2023. The monitoring and reporting program. So the rules were proposed and adopted, and registration and reporting are underway. So we will be in a position later on this year, or I guess beginning of next year, to have all that first year data in that we hadn't been available to us in the past. So all that estimating we were doing in the past, we'll have a much stronger grasp exactly what our emissions are and where we need to focus. And lastly, the PACT CPR 1 rules. There were 5 rules total. We had adopted 4 over the period, and there's 1 proposal that was in the register in December. Comment period's closed, and you'll see that adoptions later in 2023. New Jersey PACT, protecting against climate threats. Climate pollutant reduction, strengthening air pollution rules to help reduce future greenhouse gas and other climate emissions by improving the state's greenhouse gas reporting and inventory system, and reducing emissions. How did I do that? Reducing emissions of carbon dioxide and short-lived climate pollutants.
There's hold on a second. Just hit that share. You might have stopped sharing.
Good. Thank you. Sorry about that. So the first rule during PACT that was adopted was the Advanced Clean Truck Fleets Reporting Rule. For those of you who are unaware, almost everything you're going to see in the mobile source world is adopted in California rule by reference. The California rules, we don't have much discretion. It's either adopt or don't adopt because we have a identicality clause. So although we obviously stakeholder these rules, we don't have the flexibility to change requirements and limits and things like that as we do with normal rulemaking. But so the Advanced Clean Truck Rule, that's a zero emission truck sales and one-time fleet reporting requirement. The estimated reductions are there for NOx, PM, CO2, and additional global warming benefits of black carbon reductions. One thing to point out here, the mobile source rules are really focused at the particulates. The greenhouse gas reductions as far as CO2, you're going to see in all the mobile source rules isn't significant. But at the end of the day, it has a huge impact on the environmental justice communities due to the fact that it is reducing those particulates in that area significantly over time. So if in terms of black carbon is not being emitted to any degree from stationary sources in New Jersey. The vast majority is all coming from mobile sources. So all these PACT rules you see around mobile sources, the black carbon benefit is huge. So that was the first rule. The second is our greenhouse gas monitoring and reporting rule. And for those of you that remember, the basis for doing the reporting requirements for natural gas utilities, methane emission sources, and refrigerated system owners and operators was to give us an ability to better quantify emissions of climate pollutants to support future reduction reforms. Generally, prior to this rule, the only thing we had that we knew exactly emission-wise were from stationary sources. They were reporting their emissions monthly. We knew them. There's not a question. We also had other federal data that still could have been estimated, but it was fairly accurate. And then other things we were estimating based on population and things like that. We just didn't have a comfort level that we were in the right ballpark necessarily. The changes we made and the information that's being reported now is going to put us in a much better position to know exactly where our sources are and where we need to focus resources to achieve the 80% reduction by 2050. The next one that was adopted, our control of and prohibition of carbon dioxide emission rule. So CO2 emissions, a limit for new fossil fuel powered EGUs, and a 3-tiered emission limit applicable to existing EGUs. I can go through all the CO2 emission reductions, but you can see that estimated total potential avoided CO2 emissions of about 2.5 million tons per year. We also imposed a ban on the combustion of number 4 and number 6 heavy fuel oils within the state. And going back, I think we talk about this later today, but there also was a boiler piece in the original proposal for this rule. The boiler piece was not adopted, and it was not adopted for a couple of reasons. One of the reasons that seems to have got the most attention was the cost, how expensive it is to electrify. The other piece that really made us think to go back and re-stakeholder and look at this is the efficiency, meaning that electric boilers are so inefficient compared to a natural gas boiler. In most cases, we were burning more, you would burn more fossil using an electric boiler if that's your source, if natural gas is your source for electricity, than you would from a clean, efficient natural gas boiler. So we had to take a step back, and you'll see when we go forward, we're going to talk further about boilers and where we see better fits than what we had proposed originally. And the next CPR one that was adopted, this is mobile cargo handling equipment at ports and intermodal rail yards. Basically, its equipment must meet performance standards that reflect best available control technology. So this is not an electrification requirement. It requires all of these equipments at the port go up to a tier 4 engine over certain timing. Now, the tier 4s, obviously, if you did electrify, that would meet the requirements of the rule. You wouldn't have to do anything further. This is not. This is similar to the tariffs that the New York, New Jersey Port Authority has put into place. So this is not a huge lift. It's very similar, and we did work with them to make sure this was consistent. But once again, this is a California rule. We have the identicality requirements. And this obviously does and will apply to the South Jersey ports also. And the last one was CPR1. This was just proposed, it was in December, I believe, but fairly recently. This is for model year 2027 and later heavy-duty new engine and vehicle standards, and it also includes a diesel vehicle inspection tests and procedures. So the first piece does incorporate California's emission standards and supporting requirements for new model year 2027 and later gasoline and diesel engines with a weight greater than 80 to 100 pounds. That's all from California and identicality again. The second bullet ensures that all medium duty and heavy duty vehicles are subject to the same emission inspection procedures and standards. As of today, not all of these vehicles have to be inspected at state or private facilities, but with this change and with the corresponding change from the Motor Vehicle Commission, when their rules are changed, all of these vehicles will have to be inspected routinely. So that is where we were, how we got here. And I just wanted to open for any questions you have now, just based on everything we did in CPR1, any questions you might have. If you want to hold questions for later, that's fine, but just put a hand up if you have questions.
Questions in the chat. Do you want me to read them?
Okay, why don't you do that?
I'm sorry, I'm having a little trouble. I have a question.
Go ahead.
This is David Pringle from Clean Water Action in Empower, New Jersey. It seems to me two very important provisions should be framing this conversation that you didn't mention. In addition to the 2007 Global Warming Response Act and EO 100, there's also amendments to the Global Warming Response Act from 2019 requiring DEP to do rules establishing interim benchmarks to meet the 80 by 50 goal and to adopt rules and regulations for measures to meet those interim goals. And then also there's the EO 274, which makes state policy reducing emissions 50% by 2030. That's also required by law since the governor signed a law with the U.S. Climate Alliance and their 50 by 2030 goal. So why are we limiting the framing of this conversation, and will those rules and measures be part of your 2023 plan?
So a couple pieces there, Dave. Some of it was limited just for the fact that, you know, there's many executive orders, administrative orders that are out there, so we have a limited time frame. But to speak to both of those, doing benchmarks of 20 by 30, and I can't speak too far into this because there is litigation around it, but at the end of the day, we view that as necessary. But certainly as we are doing the update to the GWRA and on the initial step of the Energy Master Plan, we're certainly using that 50% reduction by 2030 as a key piece in our modeling and everything else we're doing. Any other questions before we move on? I see Ken, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks. You know, an issue that we've been talking about now for years is the measure of the global warming power of methane. And we were encouraged when we saw the last report on emissions that you had acknowledged that the 100-year value was, you know, not the only way to look at it. And you did do a, I don't know if it was 20-year value. I think you used a value of 78 or 72 for methane. We've seen, you know, all the analysis is putting that more in the range of, you know, 84 to 86. But there was no acknowledgement or any discussion of how that would become part of this process. Don't you have to go back and recalculate the greenhouse gas emissions historically, as well as change the plans going forward in terms of what the actual reductions have to be based on a much higher global warming power for methane?
Well, we certainly committed to, from the December report going forward, to report both 20-year and 100-year timeframes going forward. I think that with methane in particular, we're going to reevaluate that once we get the new reporting data in that's being submitted now, to see exactly what type of numbers we're talking about and what needs to be done. But I think that was December was the first time we did both numbers. As you can imagine, if we go back and do everything in a 20-year time period, as you can see, it really does flip historically everything we've done. So, I mean, this is still a process, but I think the next big piece is evaluating the information we're getting for that methane emissions in state as they are today, since we didn't really have a feel for that prior. Any other questions?
Yeah, hi, this is Amy Goldsmith, Clean Water Action. We, for a very long time, thought and heard the commissioners speak to doing and is, I believe, required to do a black carbon rule. And we always thought there was going to be this independent black carbon rule or soot rule. And now, just a few weeks ago, we were told that no, it's this whole suite of rules that is suddenly going to get at black carbon indirectly, as opposed to really addressing the issues of soot. And just FYI, there are 2 large national grassroots mobilizations, one next week and the week after, going to Washington to rally around the issue of soot, which is black carbon. So there's definitely a movement going on nationally, but we were led to believe that there was going to be this black carbon rule, which is no longer. And we're very concerned, given the work that we do around the ports and warehouses and the like, that we're not really going to get to that black carbon issue the way that we would like to see. So could you speak to that?
Sure. So when we did the GWRA 80 by 50 report first time, we spoke to black carbon, and our ability from a regulatory thresholds on stationary sources, our numbers show very, very little to none black carbon coming from stationary sources at this point. It's all coming from mobile. We do not have the regulatory authority other than adopting California's rules, which we have done a suite of those, to go after that. We have complementary in the other side used a significant amount of RGGI dollars, and we will continue to go after transportation in the port areas, in the EJ communities, et cetera. But it's not necessarily a lack of wanting to regulate black carbon. It's just the ability where we have to regulate it. We do not have the authority on the mobile source side to do it. And there's no benefit to regulate it any further on the stationary source side, because it's not an issue from the numbers we have. All right, next question. If there is one, I can't see the question.
I'm Mark Scotland.
Mark, did you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Mark Scotland, 4.0 Analytics. Towards the end of this segment of your presentation, you mentioned something, comment about vehicle inspections, and I didn't hear the proposed changes that were contemplated. Can you just share what that was again? Thanks.
Right. So historically, in this state, you're required to have inspected regular passenger vehicles and heavy duty vehicles, but there's always been a gap for certain medium duty vehicles. That gap is going to be closed with the rule we did, and concurrently, well, when we adopt this rule, and then concurrently motor vehicle will change their requirements where you would have to go and get those vehicles inspected each year. And if you remember, I don't know if you remember, but one of the big drivers of this class of vehicles has been a lot of tampering where they take off the emission control devices and things like that. And we really feel by having these inspected going forward, it's going to stop a lot of that tampering that we've seen routinely in the state.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. All right, let's move forward.
I just have one more question. Sorry,
Sure.
again, Amy Goldsmith, Clean Water Action.
Okay.
I just wanted to follow up on what your comments were on black carbon. One of the tools that is available in your toolbox, and we've tried to encourage the state to use it and would encourage you to use it, is the power that you have on indirect source review to treat the port or a warehouse as if it were a stationary source, given the concentrated activity. I do know that New York right now is considering legislation around indirect source review. So is this something that you might consider, given that you don't have the authority, you know, the sort of the traditional authority on mobile source, but you could have it for a port or concentrated trucking operations like at a warehouse?
Yeah, I think it's something we could certainly consider, yes. The other piece there too is I think you will see some of this address going through when the EJ rules are adopted, which is very soon. I think that traffic and transportation from the facilities that fall into those reviews is going to be approached that way also. So that's another tool that we will have.
Right, they'll be considered a stressor, but not necessarily something to be regulated without
Correct.
doing indirect source review.
Correct. So they could easily become a condition of any of the permits because they are a stressor. All right, thanks everybody. Let's move on so we can get to. So what's next in CPR 2? The first piece is California Advanced Clean Cars 2. Now, California's Advanced Clean Cars 2, the regulations rapidly scaled down light duty passenger car, pickup truck, and SUV emissions starting with a 26 model year through 35. It amends the zero emission vehicle regulation requiring increasing number of zero emission vehicles and relies on currently available advanced vehicle technology. So battery electric, hydrogen fuel cell, electric plug-in hybrids, to meet air quality and climate change emission standards. And it amends the low emission vehicle regulations to include increasingly stringent standards for gasoline cars and heavier passenger trucks to continue to reduce smog forming emissions. So timing wise, we're going to start stakeholdering as early as less than a week. On March 13th is the first general stakeholder meeting. Then there's going to be focus sessions March and April of this year. The purpose of the stakeholders meetings is twofold. One, we're asking the question, should we propose and adopt ACC2, and does it make sense for New Jersey? And the second question is, if we go forward with it, how do we address the 3 environmental justice options that are in California's rule? And by address, because of identicality, we probably have to bring in all those 3 pieces as you see them, but we do have discretion how we curtail or fit them into the world of New Jersey because everything's different. So we're really going to be asking for a lot of feedback on those areas. What's the best fit for New Jersey and how do we do it? I know we've had a lot of questions timing wise that you have to get this done by the end of the year. So we pick up that model year of 27. And that's our goal. But I don't want to kid anybody either that this is lightning pace for what we usually do in rules, being able to propose and adopt and stakeholder propose and adopt in 9 months. I haven't seen it in the first 36 years here, so I'm not sure I'll see this, but we're going to do our best to do it. It really depends on the engagement in the stakeholder sessions and how quickly those can go. But timing wise, as you can see, we're moving it out quickly. We should have all the stakeholder sessions done, at least the one shot on all of them, first week of April, give or take. So we're doing our best there, but on the time frame, the goal is the end of the year for adoption, and we hope to get there. So control and prohibition of CO2 emissions from electric generating units. A lot of the things that you're going to see going forward in CPR2 came from a lot of good comments that came in on the first round of rules, meaning you should go in this direction or expand this or give us flexibility to do such and such. So there's a lot of good ideas that came up. So the EGU rule was published on January 3rd, so it's fairly recent. And what we are doing is setting a 3-tiered limit for emissions. What did I just do? So the first is 2024, 1,700 pounds CO2 per megawatt hour. In 27, that goes down to 1,300 pounds. And in 35, it goes to 1,000 pounds. Now, you probably heard this before, but the basis for the 3 tiers was 1,700. These are significantly high emitters. There's not many of them left in the state, but they're significantly high. So they were the first tier that need to be reduced. These facilities would have the opportunity to put controls on to stay running, or they would have to shut down by the 24 date. It's likely many of them will make a decision to shut down because they may not be cost effective to put additional controls. The 27 number, that 1,300, is roughly around the average emission rate from PJM, and that's intentional. It didn't make any sense to us to put a stricter number than 1,300 at that point, because all we would do would be shutting down facilities here and having dirtier facilities in Pennsylvania or somewhere else in PJM supplying our electricity. So that didn't make sense. And the 2035, that 1,000 pound, that's basically state-of-the-art number. That number, we do have the ability to adjust that if technology goes further than we estimate it will. But those are the 3 levels. Now, how do I get that off there?
I think you're okay. I think you're okay.
So we're considering potential rulemaking to encourage the incorporation of zero or low emitting electric generation into an existing EGU's total electric output. And then being able to average those emissions in pounds per megawatt hour and allow them to comply with the emission limit. So the idea would be, it's not going to happen for the tier 1 facilities because there isn't enough time and the emission rates are high there anyway. But it would give EGUs flexibility to comply with the tier 2 and tier 3 numbers by the compliance deadline. But the flexibility, and where this is very early stakeholdering, and you're going to see the dates when that happens. The flexibility would allow a facility to use alternative zero to low emitting electric generating technologies like renewable energy, battery storage at the site, and things like that to allow them to meet that limit.
Sorry.
You can go on. So timing on this is very soon also. March 22nd is going to be our initial stakeholder meeting. We're going to have focus sessions in April and May 2023. This is something, the concept here was something that we thought of, early on before we even proposed the first EGU rule, because it made a lot of sense. But at the end of the day, we just didn't have time to properly walk it through. So we're hoping that this time we'll be able to get everybody in a room and be able to come up with to see if it makes sense. It may not, but it seems to be to provide some flexibility to get more renewables onto the grid, that it might be a very helpful idea. So the next one that we're focusing on in round 2 is facility campus decarbonization. Now, this was something that was also brought up the first time around. An example of that would be a campus who has multiple boilers, but it's either not cost efficient or doesn't make sense from an emission perspective to electrify those boilers. So they would do some sort of campus-wide assessment and come to the same means, reduce emissions by that same percent by doing other things. So that's kind of the idea here, that a large campus, a large facility, And it wouldn't necessarily even have to be the same location if, say, a company or a school has multiple locations in the state, but you're doing an overall campus assessment and coming up with emission reductions that you may not have been able to get to if you strictly were required mandate on certain pieces of equipment. But you got to pick and choose which ones made the most sense to, say, electrify or run from renewables now versus doing mandatory pieces. So this is another piece. It kind of fits in with the EGU concept, but obviously it's a much different stakeholder world there than you have. It's the same kind of concept. Executive Order 316, directs the Office of Climate Action and Green Economy to develop and release by March of next year, 24, strategic roadmap to building decarb. Executive Order 317 directs BPU to engage stakeholders on development of natural gas utility plans to reduce emissions from the natural gas sector. I think you might have saw that board order yesterday, I believe it was, on this issue. This is obviously a big piece because even the executive order of on the decarbonization, you're still only talking about 10% building stock by 2030. So we have a long ways to go on this. So we're just looking for opportunities to stakeholder and find ways that make sense for us to efficiently and aggressively go after the reductions that we need in this area. A stakeholder session to inform the policy regulatory framework that would be part of the building decarb roadmap and complement BPU's efforts. We're looking at May of 2023. I don't think we have a specific date in May, but we're looking at the May timeframe for this. So questions now. These are the regulatory stakeholder type pieces we're doing CPR2. The next step after the questions is just a lot of odds and ends that I'm sure that you'll be interested in what we're doing. Ken, a question? We have no Ken. How about you, Doug, a question?
Okay, I got it. I'm sorry. First, I forgot to identify myself. I'm with Empower New Jersey. So, one of the biggest issues that we have been talking about has been the fact that while we clearly need to reduce our use of natural gas, and I just saw that there's going to be a new effort to talk about with the industry actually how to achieve that. At the same time, there's still 7 projects going forward that are going to increase natural gas. And it just doesn't make any sense to build new gas plants that have to have like a 30-year lifetime in order to pay for themselves. While at the same time, you're trying to reduce natural gas. And I have seen no effort whatsoever in any of these rulemaking efforts that would stop this. It just boggles the mind that we would allow ourselves to get deeper into the hole of greenhouse gases, while at the same time trying to making these tepid efforts to actually reduce greenhouse gases.
All right, thank you, Ken. I mean, there's no, you're correct. I mean, there's nothing in the round 2 that would put a moratorium on something new from a fossil fuel standpoint. Doug, do you have your hand up?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, and I just want to kind of reemphasize, because this was one of the comments that was made earlier regarding the governor's executive order 274. That executive order was talking about 50% climate pollutant reductions over the course of this decade. So obviously CPR2 is dealing with a lot of things, but there's a clear incongruence if we're trying to achieve that goal and we're talking about reduction of climate pollutants while the department is looking at permitting of fossil fuel facilities. So, that those two things obviously don't compute. And I wanted to come back also to just the discussion on Advanced Clean Cars 2. Paul, you accurately, noted we've already missed one model year. We have a very tight timeline, as you also noted. And I guess I've two questions. One, obviously, there's a first time for everything. So, that I would like to think that this is possible to ensure that New Jersey is not missing the second model year. And the two questions were, one, you were indicating obviously the effort to try to get this rule proposed and ideally adopted by the end of this year. I'm assuming New Jersey would want to be following the trajectory of nearly every other clean car state with having advanced clean cars 2 regulations that are going a full adoption going through 2035. I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is probably something that might come up in a stakeholdering, but yeah, the focus has been on 2035.
Great, thanks for clarifying that. And then I guess the second thing just gets on the timing, right? Yes, this is an aggressive schedule, but if we look at other states, if we look at what Washington Department of Ecology did, their stakeholding process actually started roughly about the same time last year. It actually even went into April and May. And of course, there'll be stakeholding through the public comment period. The Oregon Environmental Department also had a similar timeline. They had an advisory committee before they also adopted these regulations. Clearly, New York and Massachusetts had a much more abbreviated process through the emergency regulations at the end of last year, which allowed them to do the adoption. I'm curious to hear directly from you. What can we learn from the stakeholdering that our other clean car states and neighbors have taken on? Knowing that obviously, as you said, we're not writing an entirely new rule. So, yes, this is a tight timeline, but considering other clean car states have been able to do this, what can we learn from our neighbors that we're able to kind of hit this deadline last year to allow DEP to hit the 23 deadline?
Well, I don't think there's any question that you pay particular attention to the challenges and questions and resolutions they've come to in other states. We're unique in terms compared to many of these states that fast track this of our constraints with the Administrative Procedures Act. We don't have the ability as some other states do to move it as long as quickly, but we certainly are using lessons learned from the regional and national organizations we participate in to learn from it. But we're still bound at the end of the day on certain timing issues with our APA that we couldn't avoid, that other states don't seem to have as structured requirement.
Yeah, no, and I know obviously New York and Massachusetts are different in that respects. Washington and Oregon, as far as I know, have are more similar to us. So that stakeholder process seems kind of just especially instructive based on the they had the same timeline at the end of 22. So it just seems like there may be some kind of lessons to learn with states that had similar constraints and not been able to move forward on emergency regs, but we're still able to hit that end of the year timeline.
Agree. All right, thank you, Doug. And Julie, you had a question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
Hi, Assistant Commissioner. My question was in regards to, looking at the regulation of greenhouse gases from the EGU sector. I'm wondering if the department has considered looking into regulating these emissions from the industrial sector. So facilities like refineries, huge chemical plants, or like facilities that generate their own power and not necessarily pump that power into the grid, right? Because we have that limit of like 10%, higher than 10% supplying power to the grid. These facilities are huge emitters of greenhouse gases, the industrial sector overall, when it comes from looking at the inventory for our states. I'm wondering if the department has looked into that.
I think we had looked into it originally when we did the EGUs, and although they're significant, it's a small portion of the EGUs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we couldn't entertain discussion going forward about going further with those. Since as long as they're stationary sources that are permitted, we'd be able to do it.
Right. These are all stationary sources that are permitted, and they're just a huge contributor, not necessarily through EGUs, but just different types of operations that I think by regulating those greenhouse gas emissions, you could potentially achieve a significant difference in reductions.
Right. No, I wouldn't argue with you there. It's certainly something we can bring up, we can flesh out more in the stakeholder process.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, let me skip to the last section. I just want to make sure I'm mindful of time. If I can find it. So what else is the department doing?
A quick point on advanced clean cars.
Sure.
This is going worse than expected. I appreciate your honesty, Paul, but you basically said this is not happening this year. The governor last week said we will stack our record up against any other state. 10 states are ahead of us. We're not leading the pack. We're behind the pack, if we're even in the pack. You've had California adopted this rule in August. Washington started moving forward with their rule in anticipation of their rule before California even adopted it. So we know you have your marching orders, but you have to do more faster. You can get this rule done under the APA this year if you want. And if the governor's words mean anything, you got to have the actions back it up.
Okay, point taken. So moving on, the other additional pieces, there is some rulemaking here. So appliance and equipment efficiency standards. There's a law that went into place in 2021, establishes minimum efficiency standards for certain new products. Those are ones sold, offered for sale, or leased in the state, or installed for compensation in the state. This was effective a few weeks ago, well, more than a few weeks now, January 18th. The department, in consultation with BPU and DCA, is also directed to conduct a study to evaluate whether to add additional products or whether to adopt more stringent standards. And the study is to be completed within 3 years. This one's kind of unique. This is, on the surface, you'd think this would be a BPU thing, since it's an efficiency standard requirement, and it's a long list of things it covers, but it's a DEP world with us, with consultation with BPU. We stakeholdered this initially early January 10th. We're looking at a potential rule proposal summer, fall of this year. And then a deadline for stakeholder comes has already passed. That was mid-February. You know, and the big thing to take a look at here is just take a look at it. Surprise some people, whether if you manufacture HFCs or you manufacture or you're purchasing level 2 EV chargers. All these have to be qualified to be able to be sold in New Jersey due to this law. So I would just ask you to be familiar with the law itself. The regulations, the law is very prescriptive. It lists everything in the requirements. So the regulation we're doing is really either, if it's not changing any of those requirements, it's really just putting a face on it that we can implement it much easier than the law itself. We're working on a consumer products and architectural and industrial maintenance coatings rule. This rule was stakeholdered back in 2019. It kind of got put on the side when we did CPR 1. We let people know in the summer of last year that we're going to pick it up again and to submit any more comments if they had it. So now we're picking it up. There won't be any additional stakeholdering since we've already done that piece. Basically, it represents the largest source of VOCs in the state's air emission inventory, you know, compared to mobile, industrial, and commercial sources. VOCs are precursors to ozone formation and secondary fine particulate matter. The existing rules control emissions of VOCs in consumer products and coatings by setting limits on the VOC content of products sold in the state for use in the state. And the rulemaking will update the department's rules to make VOC emissions from consumer, to reduce VOC emissions from consumer products and coatings. As I said, original stakeholder was 19. We went out in 22 for any updates, and we're looking at proposed rule this summer. I mentioned briefly at the beginning, we're going to do a GWRA 80 by 50 progress report. The purpose is to mark the progress of where we've done, where we've had gains, where we haven't seen gains, in the various recommendations, including the original report. The anticipated release is fall, winter of 2023. This is something that's fairly new on our radar. When we had heard that the Energy Master Plan was being pushed to 2024, we thought it would be a good opportunity then in this space this year to update the 80 by 50 report and hopefully have some of those updates inform the Energy Master Plan when that's done. Inform meaning sectors to focus on, help with the modeling, things like that. We're not exactly sure what the update's going to look like. We haven't done an update before. The update is not going to have any modeling in it. That's going to be specific to the Energy Master Plan, but it should have some nice depth and detail around which sectors we've made progress in the last years and which ones we see significant challenges. RGGI Strategic Funding Plan. Right now, the first strategic funding plan each last 3 years. This one, the current one we're in, expired at the beginning of the year. This one we're picking up goes from 2023 to 2025. You're going to see a stakeholder announcement coming out. Could be as early as this week with some dates we're going to stakeholder meet and discuss. A scoping document will be available probably the following week, sometime this month. And we'd like to get all the meetings done this month, early April, and get a plan in place going forward. We can't spend any of the auction. Actually, this week is the first RGGI auction for 2023. We can't spend any of those dollars until this plan's in place. I can say just a general thing, piece about focus. You will see certain things continue that we did in the first round. You'll see some focus on transportation remain. You obviously see a focus on sequestration remain. What you'll see different in this proposal when we stakeholder is building decarbonization, joint effort between all the agencies is going to be a big focus. And our discussion in the stakeholder is going to be how do we do it, what percentage do we do it, and things like that. So building decarbonization is going to be a big focus from 23 through 25 for the RGGI revenue. Lead by example by the department. This is something we picked up fairly recently. We're focusing on DEP buildings and lands, which we have a significant building stock. Many are very old also. And we're evaluating greenhouse gas emissions and reduction strategies, including heating, hot water applications, renewable energy systems, vehicle fleets. And the big purpose here is to really show energy and environmental leadership, gain greater familiarity with the most efficient tools we have to address these issues, obviously reduce emissions, things like that. But what we want to do at the end of the day is have a blueprint that other state agencies can use, other county agencies, local government, and maybe even non-government groups can use to actually go through and make a dent at their own, what they have control of in their own agencies to be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So we're looking forward to kicking that up further. And that's obviously in consultation with a lot of stuff BPU has done for energy audits and things like that at the state facilities. We have a couple of potential follow-ups that we're looking at. The greenhouse gas monitoring and reporting rule requires natural gas distribution companies to report each blowdown event in excess of 50 standard cubic feet. We're going to evaluate that, and also the ACT fleet on the right is our first reporting rule requirement. And taking those two information is completely unrelated, but looking at the blowdown information, look at the fleet reporting information to inform whether we think either additional rulemaking is required in those areas or maybe just tweaks to existing requirements or policies. So we have a summary of upcoming stakeholder schedule potential rule proposals. And this is the best. These are all pretty much in flux, but for definitely ACC2 general stakeholder sessions March 13th. Definitely EGU compliance options general stakeholder sessions March 22nd. We're following up with meetings on both ACC2 and EGU compliance options March through May. ACC2 will be over earlier, EGU will be later closer to the May. May, we begin campus facility emission general stakeholder session. That consumer products rule proposal I spoke about would be summer. Efficiency standard rule proposal, summer, fall, and the 80 by 50 progress report, fall or winter. I'd prefer the 80 by 50 progress report be closer to the fall than going too late, because like I said, I do want it to inform future moves going forward to the Energy Master Plan. And so just some notes, and this will all be available, like I said. The link here, you can get all the updates on what we're doing with NJPACT. You can also look at our calendar events page. It's going to have all the stakeholder breakout sessions and things like that available to you. And let's go to questions, and these can be about whatever you'd like. We still have about 5 minutes, so whatever questions you have. Sean Fackler.
Yes, hi there. This is Sean Fackler from Indrio Technologies. We're a California-based company that's helping California Air Resource Board with their gas sensing for implementing particularly the new diesel truck emission standards. But we're open to other implementations of our sensors for stack monitoring and the like. And I would just want to thank you, Paul. I see, kind of fingers being pointed at you, and just want to thank you for being up there. And I basically want to ask you, I haven't had a chance to look at the governor's budget in detail, but basically, do you feel like DEP and MVC have the resources to implement these kind of ambitious vehicle inspection policies, on the timelines proposed? Do you think the resources are there? Should we be talking about that? So, you're supported to get these things done?
From strictly just a motor vehicle inspection piece, there's a couple options there. It doesn't necessarily have to be that the inspections go to one of our central facilities. It could be a private inspector. So there are options there. If you don't have the ability to do it at a state facility, you can go private. So, and that number is fairly small given the scope of what they inspect today. It's just that those vehicles unfortunately have been tampered a lot in our experience.
Yeah, understood. And yeah, in that sense, we're working with California Air Resource Board to, for example, identify these high polluters on the road, and also to provide those sensors for, like you said, the private vehicle inspectors. And I just want to make you aware of us, especially since basically the more involvement we get from different states who are implementing CARB's policies, that more involvement with the companies that are working on the new sensors will also accelerate implementation, because kind of everyone knows a lot of the technologies needed for this energy transition are still in development today. So I just want to bring that up as a small tech company in California. And I look just forward to, I'm just entering this conversation, but I really look forward to working with everyone to make this all happen. So thanks, Paul.
All right, thank you. Bill Barron?
Yes, thank you. Bill Barron, Transportation Chair for the Sierra Club here in New Jersey. I have 3 questions. Obviously, we don't agree with licensing the upcoming or proposed power plants for the Passaic Valley Storage Commission and others. But my question is, are you going to apply the 2035 standard to these plants or the 2024 standard? A second question I have is whether you're going to keep classifying hydrogen and garbage burning as renewable resources, or can we eliminate that from the definition of what's a renewable resource? And my last question is the department going to fund the electric school bus bill that's supposed to be $15 million for this current fiscal year and next fiscal year, next 2 fiscal years, to subsidize school buses, electric school buses?
So for, we'll start with electric school buses since I can remember the question. Electric school buses, we have a plan put together. We're still not exactly sure where the dollars are coming from. There's a couple options still, but we're not sure. What we will have a plan in place to move with that first 15 million when it's available, but right now it's not clear where that money's coming from.
Well, that's the question is, we need to be clear where the money's coming from.
Yeah, we are hopeful that there'll be a line item in the budget that includes it, but I can't speak to that's going to happen or not. There was a proposed bill in the previous session that would have earmarked $15 million for it, but that didn't go through. So hopefully we'll find a way to be able to do that. In terms of EGUs being approved now, it's state of the art. So those numbers are very close to that 2035 number if they were approved. So those emission levels would be at that 2035 number versus it wouldn't be the 27 or obviously the 24. And what was your middle question?
Definition of renewable energy sources currently includes hydrogen and burning of garbage.
Yeah, so that obviously that's a statutory issue. We really don't have, it would take a statutory change to not have them qualify for REC. So I really can't speak to that other than we can only follow what the rules require.
Well, obviously the governor can propose legislation and try to change that.
Yeah, I'm just speaking to what the requirements are out there now. I'm not aware of legislative changes underway.
Well, it's an issue because New Jersey Transit is proposing, or no, I'm sorry, the Passaic Valley Sewage Commission is proposing to convert their plant to hydrogen as, to make it less environmentally damaging, and that's not a solution. So.
Okay, understood. Charlie, you had a question?
The governor signed an executive order saying 100% clean energy by 2035, stating he'd like legislative authority, but he didn't need it. So absent legislation, he's suggesting that you guys get to define clean. So what's your definition of clean?
Well, what the governor signed was an executive order to have 100% energy sold in New Jersey by 2035. That is different from clean energy generated in 2035 or clean energy consumed in 2035.
So under the executive order, what is the definition of clean and or how will that get developed over time?
Clean energy is anything defined as renewable or nuclear. So right now, incineration is clean energy because it does receive RECs. Charlie, you had the question?
Yes, sir. Thank you. I am the Central Jersey organizer at Food and Water Watch, and I want to lift up and echo the comments of Ken Dolsky and others who have been talking about the gas infrastructure and how absurd it is to build more of it in this particular moment. But I wanted to ask about your comments on the Energy Master Plan. You had noted when we heard the EMP was pushed to 2024. So I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about that decision, where that came from and why. It's my understanding there's a state statute that requires an update to the EMP every 3 years. And that last update was more than 3 years ago now, so the state is in violation of the statute. So I'd like to hear about where that decision came from and why. And I just, feel a lot of dissonance. I feel it's absurd to delay the EMP. The EJ law has obviously been years of delays, while you know, all these important decisions are about to be made and we don't have a current EMP.
Yeah, I can only speak. I'm obviously not privy to those decisions exactly, but it was our understanding there was going to be an update to the plan earlier than that. But what you've seen in the articles is my understanding that there was a decision was made to do a much more in-depth modeling, robust analysis, and focus as much on emissions as cost to the consumer, to the ratepayer. And that's the reason it was pushed back to get that significant modeling done. But not being privy to all the discussions, my understanding is basically the same as what you've seen in the press.
Well, I would just say that it would make sense then to push back all these huge fossil fuel projects while you're doing that modeling. What we're seeing is those are moving forward, and then the EJ law and the Energy Master Plan are getting pushed.
Understood.
Hi, this is Amy at Clean Water Action. I wanted to ask something about the Advanced Clean Fleet Rule, which you sort of mentioned just reporting, but there's a rule being developed in California right now that there is pressure mounting from environmental justice and other organizations to get California to adopt a better fleet rule. And it's very concerning to us because not that they're pushing for something better, but what's concerning is the current proposal is for fleets of 50 or more would be covered by the rule. And according to our information and data collection and looking at the Port Authority registry, truck registry, 92% of the trucks that go in and out of the port, and there's 20,000 of them every single day, 92% of them are in fleets of 5 or more. And statewide, 72% of New Jersey's truck fleets are 5 or more. So a fleet rule of 50 or more would mean nothing to the state of New Jersey in terms of having any, moving the trucks towards a transition to electric and zero emissions. So I know that New York and others are beginning to weigh in, as are the groups in California. And I was wondering what, if anything, you've thought about this, and then what steps you might take to actually get California to adopt a better rule so that all states can benefit from that.
Yeah, I know that it is an issue. I've heard the discussion, and obviously we do, and we're not the only one, but many of the more active states deal with CARB all the time to talk about it. And we would like to see not just this particular piece of it, but in all these scenarios have rules that come out, since we can't change those requirements once they're out there, that would address New Jersey also. But we're definitely aware of that limitation. But basically what we can do is, I mean, we're at the table with them talking a lot, and it's an issue we keep bringing up.
Thank you. I appreciate that. If you need the actual data, I could share the data with you that we've put together.
All right, thank you. Bill, you had a question?
No.
No.
Yeah,
Okay.
I have a question. My name is Bill DeBoer from DeBoer's
Yep.
Auto. I've been licensed New Jersey State Inspector and emission repair technician. We also have an emission repair facility for the past 25 years since the new program came out. My question is, what is going to be done for enforcing these mobile rules once they get into place? My experience over the past 25 years is that while the EPA has these rules, or the DEP, that there's no enforcement on the motor vehicle side, where the enforcement is left to be held.
Now, your enforcement around just getting a vehicle inspected, or making sure that they haven't been tampered with, or both?
Well, specifically around tamper and emission repairs. There's no enforcement on that side whatsoever. Motor vehicle has been really gutted on the state inspection program side. And a lot of stuff just goes right through the central lanes, and they're not being properly inspected as far as emission repairs go, making sure that they're in compliance with the state regulations that the DEP has set forth?
I mean, that's a good question. I'm not aware of that being an issue. I mean, our inspection and focus has been on those vehicles not currently required to be inspected, but have been tampered. And we do have limited staff, but we do have staff focused on those type of vehicles and those issues. But I'd have to circle back and look at the issue from a motor vehicle standpoint of going through the inspections and still not achieving the goal.
Yeah, well, I mean, the enforcement just isn't there. Motor vehicles' hands are tied. They said they can't enforce DEP rules. So my question is, if you guys put these motor vehicle regulations forth, like who's going to enforce them down the road on mobile sources?
Understood. I mean, it would be us, but understood we will focus on that issue.
Just quickly to comment on the California Air Resource Board is implementing a system to identify on-road violators of emissions, particularly for heavy-duty trucks. So those systems are being developed, Bill, and my hope is that New Jersey will have, the will to implement those as well. So maybe we can continue this conversation.
All right, thank you. Looks like we're out of time, but we have one more. Ambrose.
That's me. Yep. Thank you. My name is Alex Ambrose. I'm the Transportation and Climate Policy Analyst with New Jersey Policy Perspective. Very quickly, I just wanted to acknowledge first, say thank you for this presentation and understanding that you are not the governor, so a lot of this is not up to you. I just wanted to emphasize the importance of moving this along quickly. Market analysis shows that if we miss this model year, it's highly likely that we will not meet any or possibly all of the goals that the governor has set forth in electric vehicles and emissions reduction. So we will be bringing all of that to the next stakeholder meeting that's more focused on advanced clean cars too. But thank you for your work on this, and we look forward to continuing this conversation.
All right, thank you. So that's all. I appreciate everybody coming today. This last slide, and like I said, these will all be available, but the last slide shows you different context depending on the subject you want to have other questions going forward. Feel free, and there'll be someone on the other end to get you answers. But thank you very much, and have a good rest of your day.